quickly trying to text the Twitter group welcome and good morning as the music is wrapping up. So I'll do that in a minute once we introduce ourselves. Karibuni, welcome. Asanteni kwa kuwa nasi. Thank you for being with us. Today we are blessed, literally blessed, and you will understand why I say blessed once we start the conversation, to have our sister Darmone with us, and I'll let her introduce herself. The name is Nduku. I am the host on Kumbukeni. This is the place where we, Ubuntu Africans, tell our narratives from our perspectives, and we reclaim that role of telling our narratives, take it from those who have made it their life's mission to oppress us and to create false narratives about our people. So now we have the power, now we have the knowledge, now we have the understanding that we must tell our stories ourselves so that they can be told accurately and from our perspective. Sister Darmone, welcome so much. I welcome. I speak and think in my language. Karibu sana. I am looking forward to this conversation. And just a quick before, Sister Darmone, actually, let me let you introduce yourself and then I'll explain how this all started. Sister Darmone.
Thank you, first of all, so much for inviting me, Sister Nduku. It really means a lot to me, and it's an honor and a privilege to be here with you and to be interacting with the guests and people listening in. So this is wonderful. My name is Darmone Holland. Introducing myself.
What can I? Challenge.
It's always a challenge. It's always a challenge. So I would, I guess, call myself an integrative health and life coach. I'm also a priestess in two different traditions. I'm a priestess of Obatala in the Yoruba tradition. I'm also a Mambo in Vodun. I'm a Yogini, meaning someone that has studied and achieved some mastery in the system of yoga and meditation. I'm also a certified trained homeopath. I also went to school, studied acupuncture, Chinese herbs, Chinese medicine. What else would I say? Licensed massage therapist. So I've studied a wide variety of modalities. I was also a professional dancer for 25 years, specializing, of course, in different types of dances from the African diaspora. So that's my background, and I'm always interested in sharing information that can help and heal our community.
Thank you, Asante. And that is the goal today. So I had the pleasure of being in community with Sister Darmone recently, and a topic came about regarding miasm and homeopathy. And this is I've heard about homeopathy, but miasm, I was like, what is this? And so once I learn about this, I say, our people need to know this. More of our people need to know this, because this is going to empower us to continue, and for some of us to start the healing that is definitely necessary. And I've said this before, every Black person has trauma, whether it's directly or through connections with other Black people. You have trauma, whether you realize it or not. You have trauma, whether it's active in your brain or subconscious. You have trauma, and therefore we all need this healing, and we all need this understanding of who we are. So this is why we are here today, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. And please, I'm about to share Sister Darmone's email. If you need her expertise, I'm going to call it now, her skills, if you need the healing, the knowledge that she has to share, reach out to her. But also in the questions in the chat, ask your questions. For those of you who are on Twitter and those of you who are on YouTube, I'm monitoring both spaces. Ask questions and we'll bring them up today and discuss them in this space where we are in community. Sister Darmone, please take on the topic. Start from wherever you want to start.
Yes.
And we will be silent and receive.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Thank you. So you started with the concept of miasm. Simply put, it's an intergenerational disease pattern that's transmitted from one generation to the next. So, in other words, your grandparents could have diseases that are passed on. They leave an energetic imprint that can be passed on to the next generation, which would be your parents and then you. And even though those diseases may have been treated on the gross physical level, like say one of your grandparents had gonorrhea, this is one of the common miasms that we refer to in homeopathy. Even if they are given antibiotics, which arrests the bacteria aspect of the disease, it doesn't arrest or treat the energetic imprint that the disease leaves. And that energetic imprint is passed on from generation to generation. And in the field of homeopathy, and they're starting to really look at this in the study of epigenetics, that sometimes these diseases can actually change your genetic code and sequencing. And so, again, even though someone might take antibiotics, it doesn't change the impact that these diseases may have left on your genetic coding and the energetic imprint. And I think it's a good concept for us to explore as people of African heritage, because I think here in the West, we have been taught so much about materialism and things happening on the physical plane, and not really having an understanding that everything first starts on the energetic plane before it has a physical manifestation. And if we're looking at this through the lens of medicine, we could see if you are getting your heart checked out, they'll do an EKG, and the EKG measures the electrical signaling of your heart. So your heart is operating on an energetic, I mean, it could be measured, the energetic output of your heart. They're looking again at the electrical signaling. Same thing with your brain. If you get a brain scan, an EEG, they are looking at the electrical signaling of your brain. So energy is happening and being transmitted, being received within your body. But somehow in science and in kind of like mainstream thinking, we're not taught to understand that we are walking energy fields. We think of ourselves maybe as muscles and bones and physical structure, but this is just the shell. We are, again, walking energy fields. So the idea of miasm is that a disease can leave an energetic imprint. And if that energetic imprint is not healed, it will continue to be passed on from one generation to the next. And homeopathy, this type of medicine, we look at treating people on an energy level because this is what we are. We are energy beings. And I think in this society in the United States, people are probably more familiar with acupuncture, which I also have studied and trained in. So acupuncture, again, is probably one of the most popular forms of energy medicine here in this country. And so it's believed that disease starts from a block in energy flow. And when you strategically place needles at the right points, and it's very individualized based on what disease pattern each individual has, you select the points where it's shown that they may have energy blockages. And by inserting the needles in those points, you release the flow of the energy so the energy in the blood can flow properly, restoring a person back to health. So that's one idea and one system of energy medicine. So it's very, I think I'm saying all this so that people can start to look at us again as energy beings, and therefore we need to be treated on an energetic level. So I hope that helps.
Yes, it does. Yes, it
Mhm.
does. And we spoke about, because this is where we actually speak about everything, right? Comfortable, uncomfortable, taboo, not taboo. This conversation took us back to the European history, where we are trying to understand why these people are moving in this way in humanity, why they're so destructive. why they're so disease prone, because everywhere the European went, they brought disease. They killed a lot of indigenous people in these lands, the Americas. They killed a lot of Africans just with disease. And so as a human being, it behooves you to sit and and ask yourself, why is it that this type of person is the one spreading disease all over? What is happening? Why is it that this type of person is the one killing all over the world? So please speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, so it's very interesting. Just recently, literally within the past couple of weeks, I saw a study that was put out looking at the genetics, I'm simplifying it, of Europeans. And it was shown that there's something in their genetic structure where they produce less oxytocin. Oxytocin is a hormone associated with love, connection, and bonding. And it's a hormone that breastfeeding mothers produce, to really establish that connection with their child that they're breastfeeding. So that's shown in their genetic structure, coding, I should say, that they produce less oxytocin. So that decreases the ability to show love, empathy, connection. So that was just recently released. I mean, people can Google that study if they want more of the specifics. So that's one thing to look at. Another thing to look at, we talked about epigenetics. So a scholar wrote a book. His name is Michael Bradley, and it's called The Iceman Inheritance. I want to say that he wrote that book in the 80s. It was very controversial. I don't even know if it's still in print. Hopefully it is. But basically, he tells the story of the Europeans where many of them were living in caves. There was no sunlight exposure. There was no connection with nature. And in order to survive, it was a very brutal existence. I mean, to ward off saber-toothed tigers coming into the caves, and so it was a very, very extreme existence in the cold, no sun, no nature. So it created this, I want to say, this spirit of extreme competition. In order to survive, you had to compete with the animals. You had to compete with the other human beings that were living in the cave for limited sources of food and water. So you had to be a very brutal, cold, competitive person to survive in that environment. And I would say from an epigenetic point of view, it's important to look at that book and understand the conditions that created many of these Europeans. Whereas you look at many of us from the African diaspora, and we trace our origins back to different countries in Africa where there was sunlight and where there was ample fruit and vegetation and plenty of food, where we had a connection and relationship with nature. It produces a whole different psyche to live in an abundant environment where you are connected to nature. You have a relationship with nature. You live with others in a spirit of cooperation instead of competition. So that's another factor to look at. Another thing that when we were talking about these disease miasms, these energetic imprints that are passed on from one generation to the next. In homeopathy, we look at the syphilitic. Oh, yes, you did find the book. Good.
Yes. And
Yes.
it's up for sale. Yes.
Okay, good. So people can read that book and really learn about where this aggression and competition comes from. So if we look at the syphilitic miasm in the field of homeopathy, in homeopathy, we look at about 5 or 6 major miasms that have had an impact on humanity. So they would be syphilis, gonorrhea, tuberculosis, cancer, and then we also talk about the psora or the psoric miasm, which is basically scabies, things that make you itch. So those are the major miasms we look at. There are others, but those are the main ones that we look at in homeopathy. And the syphilitic miasm produces a very destructive pattern in someone's thinking and also physically. So a person that may have been impacted by the syphilitic miasm may have a lot of issues with their nervous system, a lot of bone deterioration, a lot of teeth, dental decay.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of us, we might have seen those films about the early Europeans, like the Vikings and the Scots, and you see this dental, they all have these black decayed teeth, and that is evidence of the syphilis miasm, for instance. So it's important to look at, when you look at groups of people,
Mhm.
what shapes their existence, what shaped the existence of, let's say, Eastern Asian people, indigenous Native American people, African people. You have to look at nature and their relationship with nature. You have to look at these disease miasms. We have to look at epigenetics, trauma. There's learning and proving in epigenetic studies that a trauma that took place 14 generations back can have an impact on current, people that are living now. So you, as a human being, if something happened in your family lineage 14 generations ago, it will show up in your genetics now. Yes. And that includes, if it shows up in your genetics, the impact on your psyche. You could be responding to things like, say you have anxiety. That anxiety might go back 14 generations ago. It might not be just your own anxiety that you're carrying. It could have been something that happened 7 generations ago. So we look at that for us as people of African heritage here in the Americas. And what was the impact of slavery? What was the epigenetic impact of slavery? To live in terror for generations. And how does that impact us now? And Joy DeGruy, Joy Leary DeGruy, wrote her book on post-traumatic slave syndrome. So I'm throwing out some books there for people
Yes.
to check out. And so she writes so eloquently, and I've heard her present and speak, and she has YouTube videos out there where she speaks on this, the impact, the stress of slavery, and the just the trauma that's passed on for generations. And so when we look at that, of course, we're wondering, or might be wondering, I should say, I can't speak for everyone, how do we address that? How do we address these epigenetic imprints that have been passed on for generations? How do we address these behavioral patterns, this pain, this trauma, these disease imprints? How do we address this and create some form of healing? So
That's a great question. And I want to go back and flip it back to you, the question for you to answer, but let's hold off for now. Let's talk about the problems before we come to the solutions. Let's identify what is wrong and then find the solutions for it. So we'll put a pin on that one because we definitely need the answer to that. At least we need to sit and talk about it together. So I was trying to quickly pull up who it is that advised John Henry Clarke when he was looking to learn about it. I think it was John Henry Clarke, to learn about his people. I think it was him. And he was instructed, before he does learn about his people, he needs to learn about the Europeans, his enemies, that he needs to look into that first. And two things, let me try and stay focused. This, right? Learn about your enemy. It's very important, because how else are you going to learn how to come up with the tools to looking at it from our perspective, liberate yourself from them, right? Not necessarily defeat them, but look at it from our perspective, the positive side. Liberate yourself from them, defend yourself from them. If you do not understand your enemy, you're not well equipped to protect yourself from them. And this is the reason why we're learning more about them. We want to know what it is, the reason why they behave this way, and how we can protect ourselves from that. But also, as you speak about the trauma that carries on 14 generations forward, 14 generations. And you have people today talking about, we can't always be the victims. We can't always talk about slavery. Yo, I think we have a few more generations to go when it comes to that, right? From enslavement.
Quite a few generations to go.
Yes, so it's still here. It's still alive. We cannot forget about it.
Yes.
And we as a people, now forget about those who wronged us. Now we as a people who've been wronged must sit and understand how this wrong that was done to us, and sometimes continues in many places, continues to happen to us, is going to affect us 14 generations ahead.
Yes.
How do we prevent it from affecting us 14 generations ahead? So this is me saying this out loud for those of you who are listening, to take a minute and just center yourself. This is not a regular podcast. This is not a regular media outlet. This is a place of healing where you need to actually focus, listen, and take what you're hearing to reflect on self. Take what you're hearing to reflect on your community. This is not a place where we are looking for subscriptions and that's the main thing. No, this is not the place where you're coming for the latest headline and all the fancy stuff. No, this is a place where you're coming to listen, to learn, and take what you learned to implement in your own personal life so that we as a community can be healed. So I'm going to ask you all who are listening right now, get that mindset right now, that I am here for healing. I need to listen even closer as we ask Sister Darmone to continue. So, and it's interesting because as Sister Darmone was talking to us about this in the space where we were, I started seeing it in my personal life. I started seeing it in many other lives that are connected to me, but those are their, it's like it's their private life. I can't bring those here. But in my personal life, with my siblings, with myself, just things that are starting to make sense. And things that we've all just blamed on laziness. The person is lazy. The person is not as hardworking. The person is not Christian enough. The person is not this enough. The person is not that enough. When we are a people who understand what ancestry is, this 14 generations ahead of trauma, when we must stop and ask ourselves, what is carrying on from before that this person has nothing to do with, as far as their intent and active mental participation in what is going on with them? What has carried on from the past? And I've said this before in this space, my grandpa was a chief in the colonial system, which means he was assigned that role by white colonial men. And so how is that reflecting in my generation? Yes. Is it time for us to pay up for what my grandpa did? You see?
It's a very good question. That brings on the idea that, you know, in Eastern Asian thought, we refer to as karma. Mm-hmm. So we've heard about, you know, like if you studied yoga and Buddhism, you know, that's the word that's used. But in the Bible, they might say, you know, you reap what you sow. In science, we say cause and effect. So it's a well-known principle, like what energy you put out there will come back to you. Mm-hmm. And often it comes back for generations. So we do have to look at the impact that generations before us had. How were they living? Were they living as people of good character? Were they committing atrocities? I had this family that I was working with as a healer and a homeopath, and they were referred to me by a doctor. And the mother was very sick, you know, extremely depressed, had autoimmune issues going on. And even though a holistic approach had been used, she just was not improving. So they referred her to me. And when I looked into it, through spiritual divination and having a conversation with her and the family, it turned out, without giving, I don't want to give details because this is someone's medical history, that her family was involved with mob activities, from generations ago, and had committed all sorts of atrocities. And she told me, she would literally have dreams about the spirits that had been unalived by her family, and that was plaguing her, having an impact on her sleep and so on and so forth. So we had to work on resolving that issue. And once we started working on that, her health started to improve. So people can actually be physically sick from the karmic repercussions of what their grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents did. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it's interesting. I love sitting with my fellow Ubuntu Africans who have an open mind as far as knowledge and thought. I love it because it takes you to a place of understanding that is just beautiful. The Europeans who want to say it, I'm not my ancestor, right? We have them in South Africa, I'm not my ancestor. But you're telling us that their ancestor is showing up in their behavior.
Yeah, showing up in their genetics.
Their ancestor might be the reason why they are as cruel and disconnected from humanity as they are.
Yes, yes.
Because of the trauma they caused. Go on.
Yes. I mean, when we look at the history of Europe, the European diaspora, because they have their own diaspora, when they came here to the Americas on the Mayflower, those were the undesirables of England. Those were the ones when they basically released them from the prisons.
Yeah.
They released them from the insane asylums. So these were the people that were incarcerated in insane asylums, the people that were living in extreme poverty. They just said, get out, and also some of them were, Protestants, they were rebelling against, the Catholicism. But those were the people that were sent over here. They were like, you can't stay here, so get out. And they got on the Mayflower and came to the United States. So these were people that had mental illness, for instance, or trauma from being incarcerated, or trauma from being incarcerated, and trauma from how they were treated in the insane asylums, trauma from being persecuted for being Protestant.
Yeah.
And this is what they brought here, all of this unresolved trauma and mental illness. That's what they came with here to the United States.
And they unleashed it on the indigenous peoples.
They absolutely did.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And to my fellow Ubuntu Africans who believe the false narrative that we are the brutes, that we are the savages, again, I mean, it's frustrating when it's so obvious. History shows us who exactly is the savage. And we need to stop believing this false narrative because it's harmful. It's not just a matter of let's stop believing it. It is creating harm in our community.
We have internalized our oppression. Many of us walk with internalized racism and oppression. And that's part of the healing, to undo that, And that's why they're banning all of these teachings on critical race theory, banning these books, because once we start to read and study and know our history, we start to think differently.
Say more about break it down. What is internalizing our oppression? What is internalizing racism? How does that show up in us?
So if over centuries you are told that you are lazy, you're stupid, you're incompetent, you're animal-like, so on and so forth. Again, in Eastern thought, the word would be a mantra, like this repetitive thought, this repetitive energy over and over again. We talk about an energetic imprint. If something is said to you over and over and over again, it becomes a part of you. It leaves an imprint. So for centuries, if your grandparents were brainwashed, I'm going to use in that way, and your parents, that makes you susceptible to that type of thinking that you're inferior, thinking that you're animal-like, that you're lazy, that you're stupid, that you're less than. And you walk in the world with this type of thinking. And it gets to the point in the book, The Miseducation of the Negro, with Carter G. Woodson, and he refers to we have been brainwashed to walk in through the back door because that's what our enslaved ancestors had to do. So even if you have the opportunity now to walk in through the front door, if for generations you've been socialized and programmed to walk in through the back door, no one even has to tell you. It's not that someone has to stand at the door and say, excuse me, go around to the back. You just automatically do that yourself. So that would be an example of this internalized oppression. After a while, no one even has to say it. You've internalized it for generations, and this is what you believe and think about yourself.
And that in an even more, I recently got a report from, without sharing too much, a friend about the attacks that are happening in Burkina Faso to the women and the children by their own people. They're being called terrorists, right? Yeah. And that explains why Black people are out here killing Black people.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. We've been programmed to do it.
And for the Americans who think this is an African story, I'm talking about your ghettos too. I'm talking about the hood. I'm talking about the neighborhoods where Black people are killing Black people.
Yes. Well, when you have been oppressed for so long, you know, meaning you're living under the worst conditions, living in abject poverty, living just, again, in just the worst conditions. It's a trauma response. When we look at the different trauma responses, it's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Those are four of the main ones that we know about and that we talk about. So when you're trapped in a cage under oppressive circumstances, a lot of people choose to fight. And who are you going to fight with? Whoever and whatever is right there. So yes, it is an oppression response, and it's also a trauma response. Mm-hmm. We fight each other. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That aggression, that pain, that anger, that rage, it has to go somewhere. And unfortunately, we inflict it upon one another.
Yes. So identifying another problem before we get to the solutions. I am eager to get to the solutions, but let's get the problems out first. As I was talking to you about my family member that needs help, we mentioned weed, marijuana, grass, right? And I was explaining it thinking this is just a story about my relative, but you said you're seeing it in our community. And it made sense to me because the little understanding I have of weed is that it heightens whatever emotions you already have, right? It takes them to another level. So if we have trauma, conscious or subconscious, underlying within us, then if we take weed, it only makes sense that will come up. But speak to that, because our people are very much in this consumption of weed, thinking that it's a good thing for us, it's natural and all that, and we don't understand how it's affecting us, people who are traumatized, and how it's bringing out the worst. So this relative of mine is very violent, especially when they're under the influence of weed. Very violent. They act as if they're not themselves. And I know this of many other people, and Sister Darmone confirmed it when she said that she's seen this pattern as well. Not just violent physically, paranoid, but paranoid in a very toxic way that will destroy relationships. So please explain this.
Yeah. So, you know, there's this thought process in our community, or thinking, I should say, that marijuana is natural, it doesn't harm you, so on and so forth. But they've actually been doing brain studies showing that the impact of marijuana on your brain. You know, it's countless negative effects that it has on the brain. And if someone wants to really look into that scientifically, you could just go to Dr. Amen. He's on Instagram. He's written a couple of books. He's a psychiatrist, and he's published lots of studies that he's personally done on people that have smoked marijuana and the impact that it has on your brain. So it is known to have a negative impact on your brain, on the chemicals that are, produced within the brain and the nervous system. I don't want to get too technical. It reduces the size of parts of your brain that you need functioning. It reduces the, let's say, the frontal part of your brain, which is in charge of logical thinking, rational thinking, having good judgment and discernment. So it's important to know that it has a negative impact on your brain. Therefore, the strange behaviors that we see happening as a result of smoking marijuana makes sense. If it impairs the frontal part, the part of your brain that thinks with logic, reasoning, good judgment, and discernment, if it impairs and just lowers and diminishes that part of your brain, you're going to have all of these other kind of strange behaviors. And people that have smoked marijuana, they'll say kind of jokingly, "Oh, made me paranoid," and that's not something to joke about, and for some people, the paranoia can be heightened more than with others. It could be extreme. And as you're talking about, to the point of it being dangerous. And you don't necessarily just feel that way when you're high. Even after you're so-called high, it leaves an imprint. It's like that part of your brain has been permanently impacted. So it will permanently impact your thinking and functioning, until you get the right kind of healing and help. So what you're referring to, I worked with a holistic doctor for 7 years. And to my surprise, I just started seeing a lot of what we would consider to be psychiatric cases, because a lot of times, people were unhappy with taking the psych meds. They weren't having, a positive response, or the side effects were unbearable. And so they would come to see us looking for holistic and other alternatives. So I started seeing this common phenomenon in African heritage men of this combination of exposure to a violent event and smoking marijuana, and then them going into a state of paranoid schizophrenia and psychosis. I just started seeing it so frequently that it made me realize, like, oh, this is a thing. We don't talk. I mean, I started to see that it was the perfect storm for creating this type of mental illness, paranoid schizophrenia. So they're having paranoid delusions. And often, as you said, they can get violent. And they go into a state of psychosis where they lose all of their rational thinking and can be dangerous to themselves and to others. And if we study the impact of marijuana on the brain, we could see that just the marijuana by itself can do that. But then if exposed to a violent event, and they go into this trauma response of like fight and rage and so on and so forth, that yes, we see people going into active psychosis and developing mental illness. And I think that it's when people smoke marijuana, I think that this is something that they need to look at, that it isn't just this benign chemical or herb that they're taking, that it actually, there's a price that you pay for it. And people should be made aware of that. I'm all for people making educated and informed choices. Now, in some cases, the side effects might be worth it, or the cost might be worth it. For instance, I've seen it help people that are, like, let's say, cancer patients, and they're taking CBD products, for pain, or they're smoking marijuana to manage the pain. When the pain is that debilitating, the cost of or the side effects that one might have to endure from marijuana might well be worth it. But just to do it as a recreational drug, I think people need to be aware of the consequences. And also, when we get back, when we were talking in the beginning, if we are walking energy fields, everything that you ingest over a period of time leaves an energetic imprint. And we need to be mindful of that. Anything you come in contact with, people, places, things, substances, things that you ingest, take in, TV that you watch, things that you listen to, music, so on and so forth, all of that leaves an energetic imprint upon you. And I think we need to use discernment and good judgment about what energetic imprints we want within our energy field. We need to be consciously choosing and aware.
And in a larger scale, given the amount of people, given the fact that I said, right, that our community, we all have trauma in one way or another, one Ubuntu Africans. So if a lot of us are ingesting this substance, marijuana, and this is what it's doing, then we have no chance for healing. No matter how much we try, if that's happening in our communities, it's an effort that is going nowhere unless we first treat that habit. And I know it's
Well,
a very
addiction, period. Sorry for interrupting.
go on.
That's not the only substance. I mean, the amount of alcohol that we drink, cigarette smoking, and other recreational drugs that we take, crack cocaine, and Oxycontin, and so on and so forth. That yes, addiction is prevalent in our communities, and absolutely, in order to heal and evolve, we have to look at the impact of addiction and what we're going to do about that, for sure.
And if I was a logical person, that is, if I'm not taking marijuana and my frontal has been shrunk and my logic is gone, right? And this goes back to community. If we have members of a community whose frontal lobe has been compromised, then it's upon us who still have our frontal lobe to help them find their way back, right? So this is where what affects my brother affects me, what affects me affects my brother. Ubuntu, where we need to all have interest in the well-being of each other as a community for the strength of the whole community.
Absolutely.
So those of us who still have our frontal lobes need to start getting into this work and sharing. It is an unpopular idea. I get that. Very unpopular idea to tell our community, Black folk, African folk, to stop smoking weed until we find healing. To smoke weed responsibly. And right now, there's no. For now, let's hold off on it. Let's hold off on it.
Yeah, I don't know. Can it be done responsibly is a question.
Not if we have trauma.
Right.
Not if we have trauma.
And also other factors. Is it laced with chemicals?
Which is happening today.
Yes. They hybridize, mix and match, to get certain breeds of marijuana. Is that compatible with your system? Is that even something that's desired? Like when they hybridize these strains in a lab, is this something that it should even be done? So when we look at the ancient cultures, many ancient cultures did have use of, let's say, psychedelics, we'll call them that. But there was a way in which this was done. So, we have some of the indigenous people in South America that, like, especially in Peru, that might have used ayahuasca. We have some of the cultures, like in Gabon in particular, where they use ibogaine, or ibogi. And in many indigenous cultures, they use psychedelics. However, there was a way in which it was done. These were shamans. If someone were to go into the mountains in Peru and do this type of work with the shamans, I've heard stories. These are shamans that they say it goes back 8 generations. Like they are part of a lineage of shamans of 8 generations. They are trained into how to grow this vine, for instance, and they have a relationship with that particular plant. Like the way we get herbs here, they are commercially prepared with no relationship between humans and the plants. Uh, it's just like they grow them out in the field, throw it in a bag, and call it a day. And as I said, in the case of marijuana, they're playing around in labs and creating these strains that we don't even know are compatible with human existence. So the shamans, they are trained also in spiritual technology and spiritual sciences, where they use different rituals and incantations to activate these herbs. And they know the rituals associated with giving these psychedelic herbs and plants to humans so that it can have the desired effect. That's not what's happening when people smoke marijuana here. So marijuana, like for instance, when it was used in India, called ganja, for instance, there were rituals associated with the, administering of marijuana, and incantations and things that were done by that group of people in order to activate the property of the herbs. We don't receive herbs and psychedelics that way in this country. Again, prepared in labs, just there's no human interaction. And that's an important thing to understand, even in terms of herbal treatment, that in ancient cultures, you didn't get herbs in a box, for instance. People actually had relationships with these plants. We are walking energy fields. Plants are sentient beings. They are growing energy fields as well. Humans and plants have had relationships for centuries. The medicine men and women, they had relationships with these plants. They knew how to communicate with these plants. They knew how to activate the principles and the energies of these plants for healing. That's not what we're getting when we smoke marijuana, and even when we take commercial herbs for healing. That's a whole nother topic. We're not getting that, here when they are commercially prepared in that way. So.
And I can just see, as you say that, I can see us moving in the woods, and it's the smelling, it's the touching, it's the knowing. Like the medicine woman, the medicine man found out about what was going on and then went into the woods to look for the medicine. And as a child, by the way, we used to have certain conditions, I'll call them, like boils. If you have that, my dad would be like, run to get this plant, it looks like this, you go and get it. But it's an understanding of what that plant is, what it has done in generations, the smell, how it relates to the disease. And some of these people are so spiritually connected that we say animals smell disease in us, that they smell disease in us, right? They know what it's smelling. And a lot of times the cure is related to the illness, as far as how they look and whether they resemble each other. So a mind shift is what you're saying. We need a complete mind shift as far as how we're looking at herbal treatments and herbal consumption in general, right? Because I'm talking about marijuana now, which is not necessarily a treatment. We need to just, number one, with marijuana, understand what it's doing to us and the fact that it needs to be paused for now as a drug of choice as far as recreation, alcohol as well, and what it's doing to us if we're going to be serious about healing our community. Right. But as you were talking, you mentioned, and this came up as I was watching the video, and I'll share the video when you start speaking, individualized way of understanding disease. I got it as far as treatment, but before we get to treatment, let's look at it as far as disease. That each of us has an individual way that disease shows up in us. And this, for those of you who doubt this, remember COVID. A lot of us got COVID, but our symptoms were very different from each other.
Absolutely. Same
Very
disease,
different from each
different
other.
symptoms. Yeah.
So please talk about that, how disease shows up individually, and that with that understanding, we can therefore not have a one fits all medicine style.
Absolutely. Well, in holistic medicine, it's the idea that you treat the person and not the disease. So I'm glad that's a great example you use, that 10 people can have COVID, the same disease, but 10 different ways in which it shows up in their bodies. And if you just give someone medicine for COVID, it doesn't take into account each individual manifestation of that disease. It doesn't take into account who is this person, what are the symptoms they're having, who are they, and how do I treat them as a whole person, mind, body, and spirit. So we have to treat the person, and that's very important. So that brings us to homeopathy. So I'm a trained homeopath, and as far as I know, I might be one of the only certified African American female homeopaths in this country, um, or one of the very few. So there's not that many of us. That's a whole nother story. So in homeopathy, we look at symptoms as the language of the organism. So the symptoms are not the disease. The symptoms are just a way of the organism communicating that something is out of balance. And so in homeopathy, we start to look at what is out of balance within this individual that needs to be treated. Thank you, symptoms, for letting us know. Indicated, like the symptoms are almost like a check engine light. So in Western medicine, the cure would be just shut off the engine light. Okay. But if you want to get to the root of the problem, you have to look at, well, what caused the engine light to go on in the first place? And this is what we explore in homeopathy. What set off this check engine light? What is the root cause? What is causing this system, this organism, this person to be out of balance and to manifest the symptoms in this unique way? So we look at, was there an emotional trauma that took place? Is this person's lifestyle out of alignment for this particular individual? There are certain foods, for instance, that may be appropriate for your body that might not be appropriate for my body, and vice versa. We have to look at, is there a lifestyle issue that's throwing this person out of balance? Is there a trauma that took place? Is there a miasm, a genetic disease imprint that's been passed on for generations that's causing this person to be out of balance? There's a lot of things to look at in order to get to the root cause of each person's manifestation of disease and to treat that. So we don't just treat the symptoms, we treat the person, and we really deeply explore what could be out of alignment and how to bring that person back into a state of homeostasis and balance.
Yes. And just remind us what homeostasis is, because as I was listening to the video, I was like, okay, let me remember. I remember hearing it in class, but what is homeostasis?
From high school biology,
Yes,
right?
yes.
I mean, I don't want to get too technical, but it's
But
this.
please do, because it helps in understanding.
Well, homeostasis is when all parts of the system are cooperating in unison, in balance, and they keep the whole system in balance. So, when we look at us as human beings, when we say homeostasis from a holistic point of view, that the mind, the emotions, the spirit, the physical body are all operating in unison, in balance. All of the systems are working harmoniously. So we think of words like harmony and balance when we think of homeostasis. And it's a dynamic process. I really want to emphasize that. It's not like one and done. You're in state of homeostasis for 5 minutes. You as an organism, as a being, you're constantly interacting with outside forces, with people, with nature. The wind is blowing in through my window, for instance. So my organism has to do something to adjust so that draft doesn't have an impact on my health. So something kicks up within my system. It's like, oh, there's some extra wind coming in. Let's kick up this part of the system so that she doesn't get sick from exposure to wind. That's homeostasis, that your organism is constantly not just maintaining this internal harmony and balance, but also this balance with nature and outside forces, so that there's balance and homeostasis and harmony with that as well. So I hope that helps, and it's a dynamic, ongoing, it's always happening. When you're asleep, it's happening. Your system is always regulating, like, oh, okay, we got the covers on, we're too hot. All right, so let's adjust something here on this side so that the system doesn't overheat. There's constant, your body, your mind, your spirit, even mentally and emotionally. Something so upsetting could happen, right? But something in your mind and your psyche, it does this adjustment so that you don't snap, for instance. You adjust and regulate, and your mind, your body, it's always attempting to come into some sort of regulation, of homeostasis and balance. So the symptoms are showing that, in this attempt to maintain homeostasis, there was a glitch, something happened, and we're stuck. This is how this unique system is stuck. And so we interpret those symptoms, like, how is this unique organism stuck in this unique and particular way? And how do we address this unique organism in a unique and particular way to bring about the healing, to bring it back into this dynamic homeostasis that we are always attempting to do? And it could be emotionally, spiritually, physically. We're always in dynamic, trying to maintain this dynamic homeostasis.
Your explanation that you thought was going to be technical was very helpful.
Okay, good.
Because it goes back to your statement before that disease is energy block. So if you don't have homeostasis, which is the movement of energy, right? Those messages being sent is energy movement, and there's a block somewhere. That part of your body that's supposed to get that message is missing it, and therefore vulnerable to disease. And so we're going to get to the question, how do we get to the point of homeostasis without medicine? Like, how do we do preventative medicine, right? Because that's what we want. We want to learn how to live in a way that is always maintaining homeostasis without the need to go to see the doctor. And I know, again, this is an unpopular idea, because medicine and healthcare is now commercialized, and they hear me talk and they're like, oh, that's a threat to my pocket. That's a threat to our ching, 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 because that's all they're about now, money. But we as a people need to prioritize our well-being over upholding these systems that just use us to make money. And so we have to walk away from the doctor's office and walk into the woods, literally into nature. We have to walk away from the doctor's office and walk into our minds. We have to walk away from the doctor's office and ourselves, understand our bodies ourselves. Because we have an over-dependence on the doctor's office.
It's a tricky, bringing it back to us as African heritage people. We have a very tricky relationship with the American medical industrial complex. I think Western medicine can do, when it comes to emergency medicine, if you get the right doctor, it can be life-saving. So if someone's having a heart attack, I don't think they want to bother with the local herbalist. I think they want to get right into an ambulance and go to the hospital and get open heart surgery or whatever. If someone breaks a leg, I don't think they want to go to the local herbalist. They want to go to the hospital, get some x-rays, get the cast on, so on and so forth. So Western medicine potentially can give life-saving treatment when there are emergencies. However, Western medicine has not been so great with chronic illness. If you name one chronic illness that has been cured by Western medicine, I'll wait for you to name it, because there's no cure for any chronic illness that I'm aware of. There's treatment, and in many cases it could be life-saving treatment. If someone has high blood pressure and they're taking high blood pressure medication, that could save their lives. It could keep them from having a stroke or a heart attack. But it's not a cure, it's a treatment. So Western medicine, to my knowledge, does not offer treatment, and cures for chronic, ongoing diseases. So that's something to look at.
But they have they have no incentive to, because they need you as a customer.
Yes, there's a profit attached to it, a profit motive attached to it. And we also need to look at the number 3 cause of death in this country is called iatrogenic disease. So you can look that up on all of the reliable sources of statistics in this country, probably the CDC website. I don't know what's happening with these websites now with the political situation, but National Institutes of Health, all of the top-notch reports for statistics, and it'll verify what I'm saying, that again, the third leading cause of death in this country is iatrogenesis, which is basically people are dying from medical treatment.
Yes.
The word iatrogenic disease.
Because when you said iatrogenic disease, I was like, okay, I need to look that up and study more. But you simply put it now, which is, we say that all the time. I was saying it to someone recently. I hate going to the hospital because that's where you die. You get sick there. You go in healthy, but you continue, Sister Darmone.
Yes, so that's the third leading cause of death. So in this country. And so that's what I'm saying. It's tricky going to the doctor. On one hand, if you get the right doctor and the right medical treatment for emergency care, it could save your life. And I will definitely give Western medicine its credit. If you need emergency surgery, things like that, it could save your life. However, we have to look at the fact that iatrogenic disease is the third leading cause of death in this country. And we also have to look at the fact that there are no known cures in Western medicine for long-term, ongoing chronic disease. And so how do we find healing? And that's where, the holistic practitioners come in, because we are there to look at how do we bring this organism, this person, this unique human being into a state of, homeostasis, balance. How do we restore balance to this person? And as you mentioned, how do we even prevent the imbalance, which is very complicated in this society, where we have all of these environmental toxins. So how are you healthy if you're breathing in toxic air, you're drinking recycled toilet water? That's what we're drinking when we drink water. It took me a long time to really understand that, when I really understood where the water is coming from that we drink. It's recycled toilet water, So even with a water purifier, it's like, is that really safe for us to drink? This recycled, filtered toilet water. When we think of, when we have this closer relationship with nature, you're getting water from water springs. The water is dynamic, it's emerging from the earth. It's been purified by the rocks and the sediment. And so you're getting this purified water that's mineralized by the earth. So you're getting your healthy minerals, that's how water is supposed to be ingested. We're not getting water that way. So if we're not drinking water in its natural state, if we're not breathing clean air, if for many of us, if our foods are sprayed with pesticides and chemicals, just those three things alone, that we need to live: air, water, and food. I think people are challenged just with those things, just on how to maintain homeostasis and balance.
Yes.
Yeah. So we have to look at that. As people of African heritage, what are we doing to maintain and activate our melanin? We're supposed to be out in the sun.
Yes.
And a lot of us, it's shocking to me. Like, I talk to, my people of African heritage from all over the diaspora with this aversion to the sun.
Yeah, they're scared of looking darker.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I went home in 2023, and I arrived home looking the way I look right now. Most of you would say fair-skinned. And then a couple of weeks after that, I was a little darker because I had been under the African sun. I was out and about and enjoying myself. And some members of my family, I won't be specific, were criticizing me. They're like, "Oh, you came looking all cute. Now you look so dark." Mm-hmm.
You see? It's so that's an example of the internalized racism and oppression that we were talking about. So a person from another race didn't have to come and say that to you.
Nope.
It's your own family who's internalized these destructive beliefs, and they're now perpetuating this upon you. And then if you didn't have critical thinking and self-love, you could perpetuate that and repeat that to your own children.
Yep.
So this is an example of this, like, internalized racism and oppression, because if we study the laws of health, we all, especially people of African heritage, need a certain amount of exposure to sunlight every day to activate vitamin D, for instance. And vitamin D is necessary for, like, all of your hormonal and bodily functions and for a strong immune system. So, like, if we look at all of these things, we're supposed to be outside. Like, even how we work in the society, we're not supposed to be sedentary,
Buildings.
sitting inside. We're supposed to be outside. For the 8 hours a day that we're inside an office sitting, according to the laws of nature, we're supposed to be outside for those 8 hours a day, active, moving. So they're now saying being sedentary is the new smoking, regarding the impact that it has on your health, because what it's doing to your bones, your muscles, and your circulatory system, it's very, very detrimental. So when we look at preventative, like, how do we prevent diseases, it's very, very challenging, like, considering our lifestyle. Most of us have jobs where we're sedentary, we're sitting inside, we're not exposing ourselves to the sun, we're drinking recycled toilet water.
Yeah.
We're eating food that's laden with chemicals and pesticides. We're breathing air that is toxic. How do we prevent disease is a huge question that we have to ask ourselves. And not to mention all the other things that we may do on top. Like, those are just some basic things that I'm laying out, basic lifestyle factors. Then I think for many of us, we may have our own individual spin on destructive habits that may challenge us regarding our health. Like, do we indulge in a lot of screen time? We're getting a lot of EMF exposure. Are we getting adequate sleep? Are we up all night? Because
Sleep.
Lack of sleep. Are we drinking too much caffeine? I mean, the list goes on and on about the way that we live our lives that's throwing us out of the state of homeostasis that leads to disease. Yeah. It's a lot to explore and to think about.
Oh my goodness. This topic can be talked about for, like, it can be a whole program we need to learn for a year. I mean, continuously. And it should be. In our own spaces, we need to continue having this conversation. And like I said before, and I'll put it up again, you can reach Sister Darmone. I'll share her email, her phone number, if you want to start doing this for yourself and figuring out. And it's funny, as you're saying, quick side note, humor. George Carlin, the comedian, he's passed on
Yes,
now.
I
George,
love George Carlin. I'm old enough to have been around, you know, when he was in his heyday in the 70s. Yes, yes.
and he
I love
has a stand-up where he says we need germs. Those of you who want to laugh in the midst of all this craziness happening, if you want some laugh medicine, because it is medicine, look up George Carlin. Carlin is Carlin. Germs stand up and see what he says about this. So we need germs.
Yes,
He's
we do.
criticizing us for being too sanitary. And
Yes,
he's saying that we have disease because we're being too sanitary in a satirical way. He's doing
yes,
this. So it's
absolutely.
no joke, right? It's no joke. But if you want to laugh about it for a second before you call Sister Damone and get serious, then look up George Carlin. But as you're saying this as well, recently, twice now, the other day while I was waiting for the bus at the Penn station, and then a few weeks ago, we're standing somewhere by Newark Airport, and we were under a light where typically, like if you were away from the light, you couldn't see what was in the air. But we went by the light and you could see white particles, small white particles falling in the air.
Mm-hmm.
And so the other day, I'm at the Penn station in Newark and I'm seeing white particles blowing in the wind. And this goes back to what you're saying, that how do we create for ourselves a homeostasis if this is happening where we're not the ones doing it, right? And it goes back to what Kumbukeni is about and what we keep pushing, that we must confront these people who are being irresponsible about humanity and the well-being of humanity. As a collective, we're going to have to, if we're going to save humanity, however that looks like, we are going to have to confront the Elon Musks, the Trumps, the 5% company owners, right? Those who are putting up the factories in Newark that are releasing these white particles. We're going to have to confront them. Capitalism. We're going to have to confront it because it's an irresponsible way of living that is creating death.
Yeah.
Right? That is creating disease because we are not in homeostasis, which is why there's increased disease.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, it was interesting, you know, there was a lot of protesting, from what I understand, happening yesterday. You know, so I heard thousands upon thousands of people came out in New York and DC and other parts of the United States. So I think that, and
What are
I'm
they
saying,
protesting?
oh, I'm sorry. I was very non-specific.
Yes.
Everything that you're saying, protesting, you know, what's happening
Mm,
politically in this country,
mm,
you know,
mm,
protesting the takeover, hostile
mm,
takeover of the government, you know.
mm, mm.
So it's really, I think people are waking up now.
Yes.
I want to believe that, you know, that there's been a consciousness shift. And people are starting to realize the impact of corporate greed, of greed, period.
Yes.
You know, capitalism, people are starting to refer to it as end stage capitalism. Is it now about to implode upon itself is a question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because when we say end stage, it can't go any further than this. Like, we are at the extreme and last stage. Like, when you talk about cancer being in the end stage, eventually the system implodes upon itself and dies. And is that what we're living in now? Because it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
It's just doing everything for profit to an extreme causes so much destruction. You know, so I think people are waking up to what you're saying and wanting a change.
And my question is, like, do you like your Manolo Blahniks that much that you'd rather be sick but wear Manolo Blahniks? Because this is, Dr. Sister Damone, like as ridiculous as it sounds, that's the example I'm giving. This is what the response was when I said to a fellow African who's on the continent that we have to get rid of capitalism. She said, "But I love my shoes," she
Yeah.
said to me.
Yeah. Yeah. People, I think, have been socialized to be greedy and also to have this disconnect from nature. So when we get back to that book, The Iceman Inheritance, and we study the the early history of the Europeans living in the caves with this disconnect from nature and creating this sense of aggressiveness and hostility and competition. If we have been oppressed by people that think like that have that as part of their epigenetics, and we have also been socialized to have this disconnect from nature, then we would think in that way, like, oh yeah, I'd rather have my shoes than
Yeah.
breathe clean air. It's just outrageous. When you're connected to nature and you have a relationship with nature, when you are connected to community and have a relationship with community, you think about other people. You start to think about
Exactly.
nature. You start to think about the impact that you have on nature and humanity by your actions. And once you start to think about that, hopefully you start to make choices that are for the best interest of humanity, of nature, for this planet. But again, we've been socialized to do the opposite of that based on who have oppressed and colonized us or enslaved us.
And we organically started talking about the solution, right?
Mhm.
Since we are there, as I was listening to the video, the gentleman says homeopathy is called a complete system of medicine because it restores health on all levels: mental, emotional, and physical. And I'm going to say this because before I ask you to speak more on this, Western medicine is very much focused on the physical treatment and not necessarily the mental and emotional. Unless you go in and say, I have mental issues, and you see a psychiatrist or something like that. But it's very much focused on just the physical. And sometimes, and now this is me speaking from experience, and I don't need a degree, I don't need a license, I don't need to give you any credentials to say this out to all of you as a warning. Sometimes this focus on physical treatment causes emotional harm and mental harm. And energy harm, because now I'm thinking of the nervous system, energy harm. I went through a procedure. My goodness, I'm trying to remember what it's called. Embolism,
Mhm.
something embolism, fibroid embolism, something embolism, because I have fibroids.
Yes.
And mine, traditionally, they went through your artery that's on your
Yeah,
leg,
your femoral
right?
artery.
Yes.
Mhm.
Traditionally, they went through there, but now they're going through your arm.
Mhm.
And I've heard a couple of other people complain of this side effect of having this procedure. And the procedure happened. My fibers did not shrink a year after I had to have another procedure, but it left me with this pain that comes every now and then, nervous pain, like a
Yes.
sharp pain, and it
Yes.
will stay on for months. I have no way to control it. Um, and this is the thing Western medicine does.
Yes.
And sometimes understanding who these people are, I'm even left to think that it might be intentional. Like they know that this is what's going to happen so that you come back, right?
Mhm.
Because they do studies on these treatments. So they know what the side effects are. And as my doctor was giving me all the side effects to this procedure, he never mentioned nerve damage.
Yeah. Yeah. So post-surgical neuralgic pain is common because if they have to cut deep into the tissue, they're going to cut through some of your nerves. And it's common, where people may have numbness because there's no sensation there if they cut through the nerves, or they may have pain, or if they cut, some of the motor nerves, then it's going to impair functioning, the functions that those nerves would be in charge of.
Mhm.
So, yes, there are side effects and consequences to these different procedures, and a lot of people are not fully informed. So there's no surgical procedure, major surgical procedure, I would say, where there's no side effects or consequences.
Yeah.
So people have to weigh out, is it worth it? Cost benefit analysis, like, is the cost that I'm going to have to pay for this procedure, is it going to be more than the benefit of the
Mhm.
procedure? I think everyone has to weigh that out for sure. And as I said, there are some life-saving procedures
Mm-hmm.
where it makes sense, where people say, hey, I'll take my chances, I'll deal with the consequences, knowing that that procedure can save their lives.
But talk about homeopathy,
Homeopathy.
homeopathy. I always go to say homeotherapy, which is what I have on the title. It's
Hmm.
homeopathy.
Hmm.
Homeopathy, correction to all the audience. Homeopathy.
Hmm.
No,
HOM.
Homeopathy,
Yes,
right? That's
yes.
what we're talking about. Talk
Hmm.
about its integrated nature. For those of us who are in a position where we cannot avoid surgery, we cannot avoid these procedures, how does homeopathy come in to make our bodies better equipped to go through those procedures and to heal, to prepare for them and to heal from them?
So, for instance, with you, like I could definitely talk to you about treatment
Mhm.
for, your post surgical, neuralgic pain or whatever's happening with your damaged
Many other
nerve.
symptoms, yes.
Yes, yes. So we can definitely talk about that.
Mhm.
So yes, homeopathy. I've treated countless people that have had issues resulting from surgery,
Mhm.
and medical procedures. And there, and for each person, it's unique because, as you said, you're
Yeah.
having this side effect or consequence. Someone else could undergo the procedure and have a totally different
Mhm. Mhm.
consequence or side effect. So it has to be evaluated person by person. So yes, homeopathy can be used in that way to treat people, but ultimately, what I have appreciated about homeopathy, there's been a push in the Black community to really learn more about holistic health. And
Yes.
I've appreciated that. But a lot of the holistic health paradigm is centered around food. So there's this push
Mhm.
to eat, vegetarian meals.
Mhm.
There's a push around taking herbs without the proper diagnosis. I mean, I actually had to go to
Thank
school
you.
for
Mhm.
7 years. Back in school again. Once I complete this program, 10 years of study of holistic medicine. So, I hear people making these blanket statements on, let's say, Instagram. Oh, take this herb for this.
Yep.
You have to treat the person. If you give one person an herb, it could be good for them and devastating for the next person. I'll give a quick example and then I'll get back to homeopathy. There was this gentleman that came in to see me, a patient of mine, and he was complaining about his high blood pressure that was out of control as well, and then he had recently developed reflux or heartburn. And so I started, of doing the evaluation on him. And it turned out he had heard some program where garlic could help with high blood pressure. And that's something that's popularly promoted, on social media. And so he started taking garlic, and the garlic started creating, acid reflux for him. And so this is what I'm saying. And so because I've studied Chinese medicine and homeopathy, I was able to evaluate his system and saw that there was already a lot of heat in his system, like what we would
Mhm.
call in Chinese medicine excess heat. And so the garlic was making the heat situation, the excess heat situation, even worse, aggravating that because garlic is hot
Yeah.
and it creates heat in your system, and it made him even worse. So there has to be, like, with all of this push towards holistic healing, people really do have to be trained in how to treat and diagnose people properly. And when people listen to these programs on holistic health, it should be for educational purposes, not for self prescribing. And also, I would really encourage our community for the herbalists, like you have to study. You have to really study because herbs can be toxic. Herbs can be misprescribed and called cause all sorts of damage. So we have to be careful about that. But I do appreciate the fact that in our community, people are very interested in learning about holistic health. How do I get healthy? what are my options? What do I need to do to live a healthier life and to create health and improve my health? And one thing that I really want to start promoting is homeopathy, because that has not been as popular in our communities. And I can understand that. Like, many of us come from, when we talk about epigenetics, many of us come from lineages of botanists, agriculturalists, herbalists. Like, I could say on my maternal side, all of my great grandparents were sharecroppers. I'm putting that in air quotes, which to me were unpaid farmers, herbalists, agriculturalists. They just weren't paid for their expertise. And so on my mother's side, they knew the land, they knew the herbs like the back of their hands. So I understand in our community, many of us come from that. And so it's natural, it's part of us that we want to take herbs and we want to learn more about that, which is a beautiful thing. But many of us have not learned about homeopathy. Like, when I look at holistic health, when I look at healing, it really needs to be a multifaceted approach. What I appreciate about homeopathy that's different from herbal medicine is that homeopathy treats people on the energetic level. It's energy medicine. And people are more familiar with acupuncture. Acupuncture is a form of energy medicine, and not as familiar with homeopathy. And I think homeopathy is really important because we are energy beings. As I said before, when they check your heart, they're doing an EKG to check the electrical signaling, the energy that's being produced and transmitted from your heart. When they check your brain, they're doing an EEG to measure the electrical current of your brain. So we are energy being. We're producing electrical signaling and all sorts of electromagnetic energy. We're producing it, we're transmitting it, we're receiving it. And therefore, it's important to have a type of medicine that treats us on that level. Before a disease manifests physically, there's an energy imbalance that takes place first that needs to be addressed. Now, herbs are good as a form of biochemical medicine, so herbs are more on a physical biochemical level. Homeopathy treats you on an energy level, which is where the disease starts. And it treats people emotionally, spiritually, and physically as well. And I think it's amazing. And even in Western medicine, they're starting to really understand the impact of stress on chronic disease. And they're even talking about heart attacks. I'm drawing a blank on the term that they use, but people having heart attacks from having a broken heart. I think they just call it broken heart syndrome, that literally it can lead to people having a heart attack.
Which explains why majority Black women get heart attacks.
That part, yes. So even in Western medicine, they are understanding the impact of your emotions and how it can manifest as physical disease. And so it's important to treat people on the level of the emotions, of the energy level, in order to restore this homeostasis. Because homeostasis happens on an energetic level. We may see it on the physical level. You may see the manifestation of it on a physical level, but it's happening energetically. And so homeopathy, the remedies are prepared in such a way that they address people on that energetic level, if that helps.
Oh, yes. So given all this information, as we wrap up, given all this information, how does this impact our pursuit of liberation? Let me make that clear, because sometimes you'll say that and people are like, what is liberation? What is the pursuit of liberation? Because we've become very, very intellectual and we want to break everything down. Or very dumb and we really don't get what is being said, right? It's the two extremes. We have become extremes on either side. But how does all of this affect us liberating ourselves, us returning to a state of homeostasis, liberating ourselves
Yes.
against chemical pollutions, against physical threat, right? Colonialists, exploiters, oppressors, all that threatens the well-being of humanity. How does this all
Can you
hold on,
hear
am I
me?
back?
Okay, yeah, because it just froze for a
Yes, I
moment.
can hear you. It wasn't, yeah, it wasn't you, it was me. So
Okay.
it was me. So, but you heard me talking about
So how could homeopathy be a tool for liberation?
yes.
Yes. So I think people have different ideas of what liberation means. It's a very abstract term, and we could have, as you said, a whole podcast just on what is Black
We
liberation.
should, yeah.
Good,
We should.
because I think people have very different ideas of what liberation might be. But I would say part of what is needed for liberation is empowerment. How can we stand in our power if we're sick, if we're out of balance? How can we stand in our power if we're not clear-minded, if we're not lucid in our thinking process? How can we stand in our power if we are impacted by trauma and damage by trauma, and we're stuck in trauma responses? So liberation, homeopathy, as it pertains to liberation, can potentially bring about healing of trauma, bring about healing of these transmitted miasms from generation to generation, can clear up emotional trauma that's been there, that's sitting. I've treated people with depression. I think you met someone when you came to my gathering that told her story. I've seen homeopathy treat many people from, let's say, suicidal ideations and bring them back to a state of balance. Like, how can you be liberated if you are experiencing suicidal ideations, depression, anxiety, panic attacks, physical impairments from disease? How can you be free? Liberation is about freedom. It's about standing in your power. How can you accomplish these things if you are impaired and held back from these diseases and these things, these hindrances, I'll say? So that's why I hope I could do a whole lecture just on what is homeopathy. But I just think it has so much potential in our community, and it hasn't been popular in our communities yet, because one of the reasons there's not many trained practitioners. As I said, I might be one of the only, or one of the very few certified trained African American female homeopaths in this whole country. So that's part of the reason why it's not popular in our communities. And I want to do my part to share this medicine with the community, for sure.
And this goes back to us starting our own schools, us having African centers, because this would be a subject that is taught, and we've had
I just want to interject here. I'm in the process of starting a nonprofit.
There you go. Thank you. Share all that.
Yes.
Yes, please.
So, and I've gotten the support of a holistic medical doctor, as well as the executive director of the National Association for the Society of Homeopaths, to start a treatment program and a school in our community to train people to become homeopaths. Because in order to be a responsible and professional homeopath, you should undergo at least 3 years of professional training, undergo the certification exam, and before you put out your shingle. So I really want to promote that as a standard in our community, as opposed to what I've been seeing a lot of people as lay practitioners without the training in the background. And part of that is because going through these training programs are very expensive. The program that I'm in now, I already did a 3-year program for homeopathy. I'm in another one. It's $15,000 to $20,000. It's very expensive. And so my nonprofit, one of the goals is to start a school in our community, making it affordable and accessible to provide training, professional training for people in our communities to become homeopaths. And I also am starting a treatment program for people that may not be able to afford, to see me, that they would be able to come through the clinic and receive free or low-cost treatment. So, definitely, I would definitely appreciate support in building this nonprofit, because in order to do things in our community, we have to have the funding in order to pay the clinicians and the teachers and practitioners to come in and to help the community. So this is how we empower ourselves. We put our money and our funding behind programs that can help bring about liberation and healing to our communities. And I also see people privately, virtually, for homeopathic treatment. So people can, contact me for that as well.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. And for those of you in our community who are listening and you have deep pockets, extra deep, medium deep, small deep, deep pockets, reach out. And you feel a need to help, reach out. You feel like we are in a state of chaos and you want to align with things that are bringing balance, reach out. Reach out to Sister Darmone. The phone number, the email is there. And honestly, as this is a little segue outside, but still related to the topic. Funny enough, everything is related to the topic. As we encounter the disappointments in our community where we realize that a lot of things we are doing are connected to Western money, it is upon us to liberate ourselves financially by doing the mass support, right? Yes. We do not have, as a lot of us as individuals, the money to support these programs, but collectively, we are powerful and we can do great things. Absolutely. So instead of buying your bag of weed, since we said weed is not good for you, I'm going there. Instead of buying your bag of weed this week, send the money to Sister Darmone's project and help the many people who need it. And you might be one of those people who are going to need to go to that clinic. Your sister, your brother, your father, your mother, your uncle, your cousin, someone in your family, your friend, your workmate that annoys you so badly, and you're not even understanding that they have epigenetic trauma that is showing up at work. It might help you if we have this clinic in this Northeast area, right? Yes, and we all know this Northeast area is evidence of the trauma in us.
Yes.
If there ever was a place that needed the study so that we can show that we need homeopathy, it is the Northeast region of the United States.
Absolutely.
So let's get serious. Send whatever you can send. Dr. Umar is out there building a school. A lot of you have supported him. A lot of you have criticized him. Sister Darmone is here building a school. A lot of you should support her. So even if it's $5, I'll be sending somewhere around that much, right? $20, $5, anything that you can, because we understand our limits. But every little penny counts. It does.
Absolutely.
Sister Darmone, do you have any closing words? And I do hope that this was helpful to all of you. It was helpful to me because and listen, you don't have to take the whole map and implement right now. Just start from the beginning over there and then start walking through the map all the way down until you start with something small. If you're someone who's into herbal medicine and is selling herbal medicine into our community and you haven't studied, that's where you start. Study so that you're responsibly distributing that herbal medicine, because it doesn't work for everyone. Yes. Right? And then if you are someone who's going through disease, if you're someone in the community preparing to have surgery and you need to prepare for it through homeopathy, and you need to prepare for the healing after it, reach out. Yes. Right? There's many of us who need it. And if you're that person who's crying for just an alternative way of looking at your health, reach out. And even if it's just that call to get some clarity, reach out. Yes. All right, Sister Darmone, any closing words?
I appreciate you. I appreciate what you are doing. Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you for your service to the community. This is dedication. If you're here every Sunday producing your program, that is showing such dedication to our people, to our community, and we thank you. Thank you.
Asante.
Thank you for having me. It is an honor and a pleasure.
Asante. To all of you, be well. Stop panicking because of what's happening. Start finding solutions. That was the best message I received this week. Instead of being fearful, let's find solutions. Let's strategize, because fear is going to destroy us if we let it take over us. It doesn't allow us to be logical and strategic. So instead of panicking, let us find solutions, and we will be well. Asanteni, karibuni, kwaherini.